Courtney, we really wanted to have you on today because we always get a lot of bad news. We finally got some good news coming out of the courts. A favorable ruling by, I think it was Judge Bayou, on the federal court declining to block parts of the Georgia election laws. Good news? What do you think?
From the Northern District of Georgia Federal Court issued an order last week denying plaintiffs' motion for a preliminary injunction, which would block 5 specific provisions of SB 202. So last week, Judge Boulet's opinion basically said that the plaintiffs, which were citizen advocacy groups, I say that very lightly, your leftist organizations like New Georgia Project, sued the Georgia legislator. And in addition, the DOJ also joined that lawsuit suing the Georgia legislator for SB 202, which was our omnibus bill back in 2021. And basically what happened was the judge said that these 5 specific provisions, he was not going to deny them from being implemented and being used going forward. The plaintiffs were unable to show a disparate impact on Black voters, which is, the left has made this all about race, of course. And basically the judge said, we are going to keep drop boxes inside. We are going to keep them only open during early voting hours. We are going to still prevent food and drinks in line when you are voting. There was a handful of other provisions as well. You also are going to still have to show your ID or your state or your driver's license when going to vote. So these 5 provisions, which there were a lot more intricate provisions in SB 202, but the left has decided to hone in on these 5 ones. I think, of course, they're mad that these are the specific ways that they cheated in 2020, and they're mad they can't do that again. However, like you said, this is a great ruling for the Republicans. And our defense lawyers have been phenomenal during this whole process. The left has not been able to show any data from their experts that Black voters, that any of these provisions had a significant impact on Black voters. Additionally, the plaintiffs had to show the legislator had intent to minimize the access to voting that Black voters had. They were unable to do so, of course, because SB 202 doesn't do that. It actually makes our voting laws stronger and more transparent and gives more days to vote for everybody in Georgia. So this ruling is a great one from Georgia. It's about a 62-page order. So it's pretty lengthy, and it's a hats off to the GOP in this one.
Courtney, of the five provisions of SB 202, and by the way, SB 202 on our side got a lot of grief, except for me. I backed it, and I always said from the beginning of that, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Well, if it wasn't any good, why would they be suing? Obviously it's good. That's number one. Number two, of the 5 things that they got sued to block, what, in your opinion, was the main thing they wanted to get out of there, in your view?
Well, personally, I have a heart for drop boxes, or lack thereof, a heart for drop boxes. I think that they, in 2020, we saw a massive, they took advantage of using the drop boxes. They were outside. In 2020, we also had COVID, which the state election board issued an emergency order saying that counties could have drop boxes. However, there was no regulation on the drop boxes other than they had to be videotaped. So now what happens is the drop boxes have to be indoors at a polling location, and they have to be manned by a human, and they're only open during early voting hours. So that means you don't have these ballot dumps at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in your metro Atlantic counties. And I think that was one privilege that we had as voters, but that the left took advantage of. And specifically with all of these provisions, one of them I will say is they were trying to block the fact that if you vote at a precinct location and it's not your designated precinct location after 5 p.m. on election day, your ballot doesn't count. Well, of course it's not going to count because they don't have enough time to go get your ballot to the right precinct location. And we have so many days of early voting. You have plenty of time to make sure that you can vote early, vote in person. You don't need to, you don't need to have a drop box. You don't need any of that. So I think that that's the main one that they are complaining about. But also, let's remember that they also were trying to get rid of the provision that stated you have to have a state ID or driver's license to vote. That's ridiculous. You literally have to do that to get on an airplane, to drink alcohol, to do any of those kinds of things. But they say they don't want it to go vote. Our most sacred right as human beings, as Americans, and they don't think that that should be protected. I just think it's nonsensical here to try to block any of these 5 provisions. Like I said, they're pretty minimal. However, the left figured a way to exploit them, and now they're just mad that their privileges are being taken away.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And I think the drop boxes were the key provisions because they put them in high-density Democratic areas. There was no chain of custody. Who knows what they put in those things? I mean, that's really what they wanted to get rid of. And as far as voting in your precinct, I mean, come on, man. You got all these early days of voting. Just go find out where your precinct is like everybody else. I mean, this is just a normal thing you do. And so if you vote in the wrong precinct at noon, there's still time to go get it to the right one if you're doing it at 5 o'clock. And that's what they want to do. Flood the zone at 5 o'clock with people that are not even legal, trying to get them in there, jam the votes in. All that got struck down. So good job. One of the things that you were saying earlier to me is that part of the communist strategy now for cheating is to tie all the Republican attorney generals up in election law litigation. Can you elaborate on that, Courtney?
Yeah, John. So what you've seen since 2020 is just an influx, an opening of the floodgates, if you will, of litigation against Republicans. And because there are so few Republican attorneys that just solely focus on politics or election law or constitutional law, for that matter, what's happening is they're draining the resources of the GOP generally and the RNC if they actually do anything. But it is lawfare. It's political lawfare is what's happening. And any lawyer who is tied to any case defending any Republican, any presidential candidate, any election law provision, they try to file a bar complaint against that lawyer. They try to get them disbarred. They try to file a frivolous litigation claim against them. They're trying to make it so Republicans cannot practice political law or defend, our Constitution to an extent. And that's a tactic they're using. However, what you're starting to see are more and more judges like J.P. Boulay in the Northern District of Georgia come out and actually use their brains and apply the law and the Constitution as it should be applied. And they're realizing that what's happening is not right. The left is they're going to continue to sue on these little issues to try to tie up our resources and our time. It's a distraction for 2024. And I think that we're starting to get a little smarter, a little wiser. And I think our judges are becoming the same way too.